She moves into it, and there it goes. It's high enough, it's long enough, it's a beauty. It's straight between the posts. The score hit out.
Hello and welcome to That's the Way It Was, a program that looks back at the history of rugby league. In episode 21, on April the 4th, 1982, a young boy attends a rugby league match at Seaford Oval in Queanbeyan. It's the beginning of a journey that is ongoing. It's a journey that has produced magnificent highs and terrible lows. But more than anything, it's a journey that has produced everlasting memories that will last with that young boy for the rest of his life. What better way to record those memories than to write a book? Matt Cleary has detailed his life as a rugby league supporter in his new book, The Milk, which details his experiences as a supporter of the Camber Raiders for the last 40 years. So, Matt, welcome to That's the Way It Was.
Rob, thanks for having me, mate. Real pleasure.
Okay, now, Matt, Canberra are admitted to the competition in 1982, or in actual fact, it was in 1981. And I think it should be pointed out that, it was by no means a unanimous decision, because Campbelltown are also bidding to enter a team in the competition. But the New South Wales Rugby League has a vote, and by 24 votes to 18, Canberra are admitted into the 1982 Premiership along with the Illawarra Steelers. Now, your first match, as we said there in the introduction, is April the 4th at Seaford Oval against Manly. Do you have any memories from that time, Matt? Did you support another club before Canberra? And what were your memories of Seaford Oval?
Then it was in Queanbeyan, which was just across the border. So for us Canberra kids, it meant getting a bus out. They put special elongated buses out for the folks. Seaford Oval was a tight. It didn't feel small, because you sort of put 8,000-10,000 people in there, and they can make a lot of noise. But it was a purpose-built footy ground, so you'd hang over the fence and you weren't far from your heroes, and you could see. Well, I always use the phrase, you could see Melbourne Inger's eyebrows, which are probably visible from space anyway, Big Mel. But you could get right up close, and as a kid, when you first started coming into sort of footy or rugby league sports consciousness, I suppose I did in '78 with the drawn grand final. That was the sort of first game I actually sat down and wanted to watch.
Yes.
By '79, I was a Dragons fan, because Rod Reddy knew some blokes at my man's pub, and I became a Dragons fan because of Rod Reddy, and he'd send me autographs, and he sent me one with Graham Wynn, Robert Finch, and Robert Stone, and Graham Wynn wrote "Up the Mighty Dragons," and and I did. That was a great little thing to have as a 9 or 10-year-old.
Yeah.
The Dragons were a great team to follow, but then the Raiders turned up in '82, and it was a fairly seamless transfer of allegiance, just because you'd see them every week, and as they went, it took other people a long time. Para fans were rusted on. Parramatta were the huge team at the time, and you'd go out to Seaford Oval, and there'd be more Parramatta flags, and there'd be more Dragons fans or Bulldogs fans or Manly fans, as in the case of my first game. And just thinking back, that my actual standout memory of that Manly Raiders game, the Seagulls won, but the commentator, the announcer, John Revo scored a try, and the announcer said, try there to John Ribbett, and you've never heard sort of 10,000 people all laugh at once and sledge the announcer,
right,
not Revo's name. So, go on.
And did you have any sort of favourite players, Canberra players, Angel Marina, or Jerry De La Cruz, Carl Frommel? Did you have any favourite players from Canberra back then?
It was funny. It was you liked the sort of so-called famous players. So David Grant was a guy that you knew from Sydney, and he was the captain. Former player, Balmain player. Even a guy like Terry Wiki came down. He played for South.
Yep.
And guys, John Hardy, John McLeod were sort of in better commas Sydney people. So growing up in Canberra, you really looked up to Sydney, and you really looked up to that first grade rugby league team, and they were superstars up in Sydney, and it all felt bigger and better in Sydney. So if someone came from Sydney, you sort of had them as your heroes. So I love Steve Rogers and Brett Kenny, Slippery Steve Morris. Even though I'd follow the Raiders, but I'd have favourite players from all these other clubs. So the chance to go down and see, these superstars, and when Manly came that time, there was Les Boyd and Max Crouch, and just Chris Choppy Close, who I've always loved watching play footy as well.
Yeah.
As a kid, they were the stars, and even though you were a Raiders fan, you're a Raiders fan because they were sort of they were the battlers, and they were your team. They represented your town, but you still had your stars, and they were the these great players from Sydney, which you sort of held in such regard.
And of course, that famous lime green jersey. Do you know? How did that come about? The lime green jersey.
So the colours came about because the first rugby league club in the ACT, the Monero region, was called Hall, and they were green and white. The ACT colours are blue and yellow.
Yes.
So that's how they got that combination. But the actual green, obviously, they couldn't do Myrtle because of South Sydney, predominantly green jumper.
Yeah.
So the legend goes, and that Don Ferner and Les McIntyre and a couple of the sort of senior figures were discussing what colour green to use, and Don looked over at a couch in Les McIntyre's office and said, "How about that colour?" And it was that horrible lime green, bright, terrible looking couch green.
Yes.
That was a sort of a colour from, I suppose, from the late 70s, early 80s in interior design, and they went with that. And it was a eye-searing, terrible lime colour, and that's how they came up with that.
It doesn't. I've got to say, it doesn't appear to be that lime green anymore, mate. The modern jersey, it's not that lime green. It's a different green now. I think they're wearing now.
Yeah, they've had a crack at a few different shades over the years. It seems to be the one from about 1994 that everyone seems to say is the Raiders colours, because probably was the great. That was the great.
Yes.
That was the end of that great dynasty, or the peak of that great dynasty when Mal sort of was still going. They won that grand final, and they've had a few different shades. I hope they never go back to the first one, but
okay.
And there was another one around 2000 that they had a crack at too, which was sort of a bottle green. They had black and white in there as well. I don't know, that was a bit of an abomination, but I quite like the one they got going there.
All right, okay. Now Canberra finish. They finished last in that first season. They win the wooden spoon, but it's the only year that they have finished last. But things improved very quickly, though, because by 1985, Canberra are involved in a playoff for fifth place. They have playoffs back in those days. They lose that playoff to South Sydney. But in 1986, we have a pretty major event, I think you could say, in Canberra's history, because Mal Meninga. Now, Mal Meninga, by this stage, he's a well-established player. By this stage, he's played State of Origin. He's played for Australia. He's winning grand finals for South up in Brisbane. Virtually every Sydney club is trying to sign Mal Meninga, but he joins the Canberra Raiders. So, Matt, why do you think he chose to sign with Canberra?
Oh, money, I'd say, would have had a fair bit to do with it, mate.
Yes.
The poker machines were, the rivers of gold coming out of Queensland Links Club, effectively, with no pokies, there's no Raiders. And Donny Furner were generally now, got offers that he just thought was obviously clearly good enough. I assume he saw. He bought into their vision. He saw what they were trying to do, and that they had a few bob, and that they were going to mix their talented local blokes, guys like Chris O'Sullivan and Ashley Gilbert, and guys brought and bred locally, but they knew they needed some stars to add to that mix, and up to Queensland they went. Mal and Gary Belcher and Gary Coyne. And it was a pretty smart, savvy move. From the Brains Trust, and particularly go up to Mal, because as you said, he was at the peak of his powers. He's 25 years old. He played Origin. He played for Australia. Just an awesome, force of nature sort of footy player, and to get that sort of marquee guy down to the club, and for people, because Mal was so widely respected, for Mal to buy into that. The ethos and what they were selling made a lot of sense. And next thing you know, got Peter Jackson came down and the Walters brothers, and the list goes on and on. And then to add to that, you had again what they did. They got local blokes, Brad Clyde, Laurie Daly, Ricky Stewart, Glenn Lazarus was a Queanbeyan boy, one of the great front rowers, and they just got a nice mix. But yeah, Mal, the Raiders were BM and AM, if you like, after Mal and before Mal. As a force, because Canberra had been derided over the years, because it'd been the public service place, it was cold, it was miserable, a bunch of roundabouts or Fishwick or whatever, I don't know, people had smashed it, and there was a perception that why would you want to go there? Well, Mal went, I'm going there because they're paying well and it's a bloody good club, and that and down they came, because it was good enough for Mal, probably good enough for a whole bunch of people.
Well, the signing of Mal Meninga quickly sort of brings results, because in 1987, Camber have made the grand final. Were you surprised by this?
Definitely. Yeah, it felt a little bit early. Though, looking back, the side that they had, with Jackson and Belcher and Meninga, Lance Coyne, these guys, are young Lazarus, it was at the start of the dynasty, the start of the great. They obviously had those 3 or 4 young blokes I mentioned before. To become a truly great side. But look, that side, that 87 side, we knew they were good going into 87. We knew they could compete. We didn't think they were grand finalists, because we still sort of, you still sort of had a little bit of a, what's the word? You still sort of thought they were the Raiders and they were sort of battlers. I think 87 they came of age, and Mal has actually said that, been quoted to say 87 was the year that, he remembers looking into the crowd once at Seaford Oval, and there were more Raiders flags than Parramatta flags, and that was in 1987. So, the Parra was still, the reigning premiers in 87.
Yeah.
And the Raiders beat them at Seaford Oval, and Mal remembers looking into the crowd and saying, we've done it. We've turned Canberra to become a Raiders footy club, and then making the grand final that year, boom, everyone was all in, and there was the butcher shops in Queanbeyan were all doing green sausages and all that sort of stuff. So
it
was when people, I think, in Canberra actually finally fully realised that it was a bloody seriously good football team, and could not only compete in the big league but start to beat them. And you talk to Tim Sheens, who became the coach in '88. He thinks the '88 side was his best side, which is saying a lot. The '88 side, he reckons that's the best side he's coached. Certainly the Raiders, which is a bold statement given 90 and 94.
Yeah, well, this is the other, I suppose, surprising thing, because they make the grand final there in '87. They are beaten by Manly, but then, Don Furner as a coach at this stage with Wayne Bennett. Wayne Bennett was there as his sort of assistant, but they well, they stand down, and in 1988, as you said there, this coach from Penrith, he hasn't really got I suppose, a fairly modest record of coaching at Penrith, but Tim Sheens becomes the coach. So again, this was a bit of I suppose a bit of what was your reaction when Tim Sheens sort of took over?
Yeah, no, I think I was probably in my mid-teens then, so it was sort of I didn't thought, oh well, they've got a new coach, he's from Sydney, they must know what they're doing, I suppose. But it didn't sort of really register. He knew he was a good player, a good coach, but look, the fact that he walked into a sort of a perfect storm, Tim Sheens, and I'm sure he'll tell you he was probably a bit lucky to have done it. That, as I said, that the start of that that great dynasty, '88 was an awesome side, but to that side they added, to the nucleus of a bloody very strong football club was added the brilliance of Clyde Stewart, Daly, really finding his feet. So Tim Sheens walked into that. Like 8 years later, he's a super coach, So
At
the time, like you said, he was just the coach from Penrith. I probably knew him more as a player. He was a front rower. He was the smallest ever front rower. I used to get out to Penrith Park, and I don't remember him. I barely remember him doing anything on the football field. He obviously did a lot of work, and he tackled it, made a lot of tackles. But the question, he wasn't sort of met with with a bed of roses down Northport Avenue, but he soon earned his stripes for sure.
Well, again, it doesn't take Tim Sheens long to make an impact, because in 1989, and this is one of the matches that you highlight in your book, but 1989 culminates in, a lot of people have described it as the match of the century, but Matt, your memories from 1989?
Oh, well, personally, I was at a mate's place in Tuggeranong, the suburb of Tuggeranong, just watching. We had a little barbie and had eskies. I remember drinking those little throwdowns. They were called little 250 ml bottles, and we had a couple of cartons of those and a barbie, and I just remember just standing up and running around and watching the game through splayed fingers, just wondering what else could go on in this game. And the main thing I think I remember was when Chicka Ferguson scored that try to even it up, or to kick it, was that you realise how many people around the suburbs were doing exactly the same as us, because you could hear them all roaring over the fences. You could hear people cheering in that barbie, and there were, you could hear them across the street, and then that was a great buzz.
Yes.
Locally. I mean, the game, I still watch the game now and get goosebumps from it, because I still, here comes that bit and here comes that bit, and
yes,
it's amazing that happened, and it just kept going, and there's a quote from Graham Hughes, who was one of the callers, and he said Ben Elias hit the crossbar with his drop kick, and Graham Hughes's commentary was, what else can happen? He was like, what the hell else could happen in this match? And the answer was like, there was a half a dozen more things to come. Chicka scored, and Jackson scored, and Chris O'Sullivan kicked the field goal, and it was just they took off Siren and they took off Roach. All these little stories, all these threads. In my mind, it's the greatest decider, not just of rugby league, but I can't imagine there's been a better Super Bowl or FA Cup final or World Series Game 7 or anything just to rival the drama and story and just a particularly good game of footy as well, played for sheep stations by players at the peak of their powers. Guys like Wayne Pearce and Blocker and Benny were superstars at the time. They were all playing for Australia. Wayne Pearce was just such a lauded figure, and the changing of the guard, Brad Clyde became the new greatest lock forward you've ever seen. And all of a sudden in that game, Wayne Pearce towards the end looked old. He started dropping the ball, and he looked like a 30-year-old. He looked like the 30-year-old bloke he was, while Brad Clyde was still tearing around running like an absolute young racehorse. So all these stories, mate, and and then your team, who are still there, Raiders were still underdogs going into it and written off, and Canberra's always had a little bit of a chip on its shoulder about Sydney looking down on us, and that's something sort of Queenslanders knew in their bones about Sydney Rugby League, and the Raiders were full of Queenslanders, so it was a perfect storm, and just a magnificent game of footy. And 97, the Knights was a great game. 2015 Cowboys Broncos was a fantastic game of footy. I'll put the Raiders 89 against anyone and go to the grave. It's the best grand final, best decider ever.
I think a lot of people sort of probably, because I don't know if you remember there, but during that season, early in that season, Mal Meninga badly broke his arm there, and I sort of think a lot of people sort of thought, oh well, Mal's gone, sort of Canberra's gone, but then they went on this towards the end of the season. Mal came back, Meninga came back, and they went on this long sort of winning streak there. They had a long winning run just to get into the finals, I think. And then at half time, when they were down, it was 10-2 or 12-2 at half time. I think most people sort of thought, oh, it's over. But no, as you said, there were many twists and turns. And Steve Jackson, who had hardly played a game. I don't think he'd played a game, or he'd only played a few games throughout the whole season, to come on and score that try. Well, as I said, that's why many people regard it as the match of the century. And the match of the century is followed. Well, it's followed by what I think most supporters would call, let's say, rugby league heaven, because in 1990 there's another grand final win, this time against Penrith. Canberra makes the grand final in all three grades. They win the club championship as well in 1990. It's the only time they win the club championship. So your memory, and of course in 1990 as well, Canberra moves to the Bruce Stadium. So what was the supporters' thoughts about this, moving to Bruce Stadium in 1990?
Well, there were a few Queanbeyan people that weren't keen on it. Including the actual Victor the Viking, the bloke who used to wear the Victor the Viking suit. He didn't go out to a game for a while. And they're still mates of John McIntyre's now who won't go out. Because Queanbeyan was very much the genesis of the footy club, with the Leagues Club and the strong local Queanbeyan United Blues and Roos. But anyway, personally, I loved it. It was a much cleaner, I don't know, sort of more modern sort of stadium, even though it was sort of purpose built for athletics.
Yes.
It was an athletics track, but it still just seemed still seemed a cooler, more modern place to watch footy. The first game I went out to was the Raiders. They beat the Roosters 64-4.
Yeah.
Mountain View scored 5 tries, and I like Bruce. I still like Bruce. They've made a few changes to it over the years to make it a bit tighter on the field, but Bruce became an absolute graveyard for visiting teams. Not only because the team was so good, but people didn't like the cold, so it was we'd get cold for them. So, and the Raiders trained in that, so it was just normal. So you get these, I remember some of the Broncos teams coming down who are, Renouf and Langer and these champions of the game. And the Raiders would towel them up. The Raiders had the Broncos as bunnies, right? And they wouldn't just beat them; they'd put 30 on them.
Yes.
Just because you'd see Alan Langer shivering and Kevin Walter shit. They didn't like it. So
yes.
the Raiders did, and the fans would come out, and that's another thing that was in the club's favour, that the Raiders fans, well, you get cold, but you do. There is an invention called clothes that people wear, so you put the beanie on and the scarf on, and put the hot dogs in the thermos, and out you go. And at the time, there was plenty of entertainment, because they had some amazing run of success at Bruce, and it actually followed on. The Brumbies had the same. The Brumbies turned the Bruce Stadium into a graveyard for visiting teams too, and probably throughout the 90s, there were teams who would come down. You could see them. They'd get off the bus and they were visibly beaten straight off the bat. It was because there was Meninga, Daly, Clyde, Stewart, Lazarus, Belcher, all these champions.
Yes.
And it was a bloody bludger of a place to play because it wasn't very comfortable. So good for us guys for them. So the short answer, yes. Good, Bruce.
Yeah. Anyway, well, as you said there, by this stage now, the Raiders have amassed a galaxy of star players. As you said there, Mal Meninga, Daly, and Ricky Stewart, Clyde, and Lazarus. So we start to hear stories that Canberra has got some salary cap pressures, and players are starting to leave the club, or they're retiring. A club stalwart like Dean Lance, he retires, and the season ends there in what you describe in the book as a kick in the nuts. You lose the 1991 grand final to Penrith.
Yeah, well, it was actually being stabbed in the nuts because
Stabbed in the nuts. Sorry,
that's how Ricky Stewart described the groin needles that he had to get before and after the games. That's how it felt. There's a funny little anecdote about Tim Sheen's taking Sticky up to the surgeon in Sydney, and Tim Sheen's, being the coach, being a good bloke, says, "Like, oh, look, I want to get the injection too, just to see what it's like." And the doctor says, "Well, I can't do that ethically, but if you insist." So then he gave this injection to Sticky, who screamed in pain because it was such a horrible, like being stabbed in the nuts. And Tim Sheen's said, "Oh well, look, if it's unethical, doc, then I better not go there." So, but yeah, that was that's what Ricky Stewart put himself through to play in '91. Tough, mate. Laurie Daly shouldn't have played in that '91 grand final, and it was just Penrith's time at the time. But it took their best game to beat a busted Raiders team. That's how good the Raiders were at the time. And guys like Ross Simmons Mark Guy will say that they had to bring them. It was a great game, really. Penrith brought their best game, and it was their sort of destiny. And the Raiders, when they had the ball, just couldn't kick it far enough away.
Well
done. And it was sort of a bit of a bittersweet thing, I suppose, for Raiders fans and the players, and that there was such a good feel-good story for Penrith, their first grand final, and Roy Simmons going out a champion, and that sort of thing. But the salary cap stuff was interesting. They lost for '92. They lost 5 or 6 really good players like Nigel Gaffey. Glenn Lazarus was the big one to go to Brisbane. Mark Bell. They lost half a dozen good players, but they kept those whom they wanted to. That was Stewart, Clyde, Daly, these guys. They all took 15% pay cut. Don't think they went hungry. There were still locals willing to help them out, this and that. The Raiders were 600 grand over the salary cap of 1.5 mil. And they didn't. There's probably still people who think, why didn't they lose premierships with us like the Storm did? And Canterbury were fined all of their match payments in 2003, 2002. I think the Raiders one was more. Les McIntyre and John, his son, had a sort of a handshake agreement with a lot of blokes. And they didn't their accounting practices probably weren't something that KPMG or whatever would have held up as forensic accounting. And I think it was more of a stuff up. And they Cream and Leeds Club was still kicking goals. So they branched out and bought more clubs. They bought a disco for $2 million Queanbeyan that was only open 2 nights a week. So they've had a few questionable decisions. But 92 was effectively a write-off. As Clyde Stewart and Daly, I think they only played like 1 or 2 games together. Or 3 of them. And then 93, they went out and found a bunch of Kiwis.
Well, all right, to help with these financial problems there, you need sponsorship. And in 1993, Canberra Milk becomes a sponsor of the club. Matt, this is very important as the title of your book indicates. So they're still involved with the club, Canberra Milk?
Yeah, they're on the sleeve.
Yep.
They've had great value out of being a sponsor. I think because what happened in 92 and sort of 91, the local people rallied, and there were people, they were taking, they'd go to games and people would take blankets around and people would throw money in to try and save our Raiders. People were selling badges, save a Raider. So many of the local people wanted to try and keep the footy club together. Even with the stuff ups of the management, and I think Canberra Milk, being a corporate local person, sort of went, well, we can buy into the goodwill for this side, sponsored the club, and the Raiders were only 92 was the only sort of dud year. 93 they were a genuine force again. Probably should have won it outside of Ricky Stewart's knee injury at the end.
Yeah.
94 was probably one of the greatest sides there's ever been. You can put them up there with any of the great dynasties of the Storm and the Roosters, and go back to Parramatta at 81. Magnificent. So Canberra Milk, and I think like I called the book The Milk because of a sort of a organically grown, almost online. I think people say hashtag up the milk because fans, young and old, sort of go back to 93, 94 as the great period for the footy club.
Yes.
And the milk, Canberra Milk. There was the word milk was written in big bloody blue letters on the front of the jumpers. So they became The Milk, and Up the Milk became a thing, and now it's a title of a book. So yeah.
Yes. Well, as you point out there, as we were sort of talking about earlier, players are starting to leave the club. Glenn Lazarus, as you pointed out there, he goes up to Brisbane. Brett Todd, the other front rower from 89, he's gone to the Gold Coast, and Kevin Walters is gone. Chris O'Sullivan, who played in that 87 grand final, he's gone off to play for Swinton in England there. And a fella called Craig Bellamy follows him. But the Raiders, well, I suppose you could say they've been out and they go on a voyage of discovery in the Pacific Ocean. They sign a fella from Fiji called Noah Nandruku. There's a couple of Kiwis, Quinton Ponya and Ruben Wiki. They've even got a fella from Papua New Guinea, David Wesley, up in Papua New Guinea. The voyage of discovery brings some fruit because 94 Canberra wins the grand final against Canterbury Bankstown.
Yes, smashed them, really. And you left out a fellow called John Lomax, who actually couldn't play in that bloody grand final, but was, is in plenty of people's Raiders team of the century, if you like, as a front rower, as a partner to Lazarus. And, fabulous footy player and good fella. They, I think it was a late 92 or early 93, there was some sort of tournament, might have been in Tonga, called the Super Pacifics League Tournament, and Tim Sheens went over there with Kevin Neal.
Yep.
And took a checkbook over and whomever they like the look of, and Lomax, Ponga were there, and Druku. David Wesley from PMG. There's a bunch of other blokes too. They signed, might have been a dozen guys out of that Kiwi diaspora, if you like. Sean Hoppy was another one. Actually, Sean Hoppy came over the year before, but he turned into a winger for New Zealand. I mean, I suppose if you're a winger on the back of a back line with me, Gadali, Clyde, Stewart, all those blokes, you can't help but sort of go okay. But again. Tim Sheens is pretty canny, and sort of similar to Ricky Stewart going to England to find the cream of the footy comp there. Tim Sheen's found these gems, Poingal Lomax, Nandruku, and Ruben Wiki was just an absolute axe. I remember seeing Ruben Wiki in his first game at Bruce Stadium, and he was on the wing, and I thought, well, who's this little fella? What's he doing? And then he just started belting blokes, and you're like, okay,
Yes.
Okay, good one, Tim. So yeah, fair comp.
Yeah.
So, and he ended up playing. I think he played every position bar halfback. I think.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
Fabulous player.
Okay, so Matt, in 1995, you're still celebrating there, Canberra's third premiership, and we see a fairly sort of seismic event in the history of rugby league, and from your book, it sounds like a pretty seismic event in your history as a rugby league supporter, because in 1995, Super League war begins. Canberra Raiders joined the Super League. So what was your reaction? What was the reaction of Canberra supporters to this move?
Well, this Canberra supporter brushed the club and brushed the game.
Okay.
Almost talk about seismic. Yeah, I went into the 95 season as I had every other one, as a super fan, just as someone.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden, April 1, there's this thing called Super League, and that's all you heard about, and it just dominated the news. And the more you heard about it, the more, it just became this all-enveloping, and the actual game, the footy that you liked, was almost secondary. Well, it was secondary to this greater theatre of this great takeover this attempted takeover by, Murdoch, whom some people saw as the enemy, and then it just became this absolute shit fight that I lost interest in pretty quickly, just because I saw it. I was only sort of mid-20s myself, but I don't know. I just knew straight away that it was a battle for pay TV, and it was a battle between corporate behemoths, pissing for distance.
Yes.
I just didn't like it straight away, and look, just all this big money thrown around, and it was sort of a loss of innocence at the time for me. Yeah. But then at the same time, I was a rugby player. I played rugby for a local club called Royals there, and the Wallabies were starting to go gangbusters. The Brumbies were become a new thing, and my allegiances went there. And by '97, I was overseas. I didn't give a fuck about the Raiders or rugby league.
Yeah,
because the Brumbies in a divided comp.
Yeah, because the Brumbies, when they first came into that, whatever the Super 12 or whatever it was back then, they were quite successful early on, the Brumbies, weren't they, in those early years when they came into the rugby union competition?
Yeah, they immediately started playing a very nice brand of football as well. So rugby going up to probably up to the 80s, probably early 90s was still, some people will knock it now, so it's still boring. No, up to there was you could win rugby just by kicking it and playing 10-man rugby and scrums and rucks and mauls and that sort of stuff. But the Brumbies turned up and brought a lot from Randwick Rugby Union, a lot of that DNA of a guy like David Knox turned up and Ewan McKenzie and these blokes who were the outcasts of. They couldn't get it. Owen Finnegan was a great player for the Brumbies, but they couldn't get a gig with the Waratahs or Queensland, so they came down and they created themselves and they created running rugby, and it was very attractive to watch. 96, they almost made the finals. 96, they made the grand final. Anyway, but they were just playing an entertaining brand of footy, and it was a genuinely exciting time to watch rugby union. Right up to 99 when they won the World Cup. The Wallabies won the World Cup, and so my particular fandom for both the Raiders and for rugby league went from the 94 grand final at its peak, going to 95, looking forward to another season. And by the end of 95, I did not give I just tuned right out from rugby league. I'd had enough of this politics, if you like. This, the hypocrisy of it, of these foot soldiers going into bat for their team and lauding Kerry Packer, who did the same thing with cricket years ago, saying, "Oh, look, Kerry Packer's a knockabout. He cares what's right for rugby league." come on. Everyone was right for Kerry Packer, as Rupert Murdoch did, and it was about Foxtel versus Optus at the end. Packer only had 10%. Packer had, I think, 5% of Optus. Who were the mob trying to get everyone's, because pay TV was coming. And they wanted people to pay. They knew it was coming, and the actual game, which I love. The football, the games, the actual the athleticism, just became so secondary to this political monster that was dominating the news, and I just tuned out. And plus, as I said, there was another great game going on. There was, and which I really had passion for, and so that's right.
Okay, Matt. So you actually, and you went overseas as well at this time, didn't you? So you're going, you went over to, you're living over in England, but after Super League, we go into a period, and when I was doing some research for the interview here, and I called this period the yo-yo years, because there was a period there of about 10 years or even more probably, where Canberra sort of just went up and down the table. 1 year they'd make the finals, and then the next year they'd be 11th or 12th or 13th. But there's some important things did happen during this period. And one of the things that happened from a supporter's perspective was, I suppose, a supporters' website was established in 2005. Nick Townsend, Ed Gould and Steve French got together and started a website called The Greenhouse, which was an online sort of supporters group. Was this an important development for the Canberra supporters? Were you able to sort of, I know you were probably still disaffected at this time, but were you able to keep in touch with what was going on at the club?
Only cursory, It wasn't until probably about 2012 that I sort of came back to actually care about it. I mean, I watched them, and I sort of had a sneaking. I was sneaking back into my affections around sort of 2010, 2012, but I wasn't an internet consumer of the footy club. So, the Greenhouse has been I'm not sure they've got 90,000 viewers at the moment or something.
Yes.
Yeah, they're still kicking goals. I don't know, Steve, to say about it. That's the reason I call them. The reason I had the tagline, "The Raiders of Rugby League's Great Enigma," is because of that yo-yo effect that you talk about. They were just up and down. They could blow teams away. They could go on 10, 8 and 10 straight winning runs. And flog everyone, get into the finals and drop out. So 2003, they had a good year. Followed by a couple of bludgers. They even do it now. 2016 had an awesome year. Probably should have won in 2016. Had two bludgers, 2017, 2018. 2019 made the grand final. 2020 almost made the grand final. 2021 back to the cellar. But so and that for me in that year. So I sort of came back to rugby league for when Matt Bowen was running around for North Queensland Cowboys, because he was so much fun to watch. And the Raiders were still a bit going. I was living in Sydney, in the eastern suburbs, and so it was a bit out of sight, out of mind. Canberra still. But they started to come back to me, and they've always been, even throughout that enigmatic period, they've always been entertaining as an entertaining footy club to watch. They're capable of just beating anyone and by a score, and just doing things, in the wet at night at Canberra Stadium that other teams couldn't. And then they go to West Tigers, who might have been playing like bustards at Leichhardt and lose by 30. And then no one could pretty put a finger on it, and it was odd.
Well, there was another thing that sort of starts to happen during these yo-yo years. I'd just like you to maybe comment on this, because for a start, there's a player there called Todd Carney, who's obviously a very good player. but well, he's also a bit of a, let's say, a wild child off the field. In 2008, he's sacked from the club, but Matt, he's not the only player to get sacked from Canberra. For behavioural reasons. He's just the beginning of a whole line of players there, and this does impact greatly, I think, on Canberra's on-field performances. So, well, have you got any thoughts about this?
The Raiders had always had through the 80s and 90s pretty good, solid drinking culture. In fact, they used to call it the zoo, and the Raiders. I think Toddy was a bit of a throwback, if you like. He was just always a sort of a wild child, as you said.
Yeah.
But he turned up when sort of early 2000s, when media was really starting to focus on these and realise the pay dirt of highlighting the misdeeds of rugby league players, because there was such a rugby league, and all of a sudden, there was ratings and column inches in highlighting this sort of stuff. But yeah, so Toddy didn't want to change his ways. They gave him a few chances, obviously, and then they gave him a few ultimatums, one of which was get off the piss for a year, which he didn't want to do. So eventually, after Dory went, had a year up in North Queensland, came back to the Roosters and then killed him, because he was, a very good player, but obviously had a bit of form. Toddy, but and then Joshy Dugan did his thing with Blakey Ferguson, and that, and there was a real culture at the club, probably around 08 to 2013, I suppose, or 2012. There were professionals, there were amateurs playing professional. There were blokes who were just getting on the drink before games, sneaking out on trips away, just being dickheads, being immature. And, it showed on the pitch. Jolly Monahan's silly muck around thing with the pooch didn't help, I suppose, but that was more just sort of infamy in a Mitchell Pearce or John Hupawati sort of way. But again, that was just blokes being dickheads on the piss, and it reflecting badly on the brand, just because it got such legs.
Yes.
And social media, by that time, social media starting to turn up as a factor, and things go viral, and everyone's got a phone, and now I think, I'm pretty sure players are pretty aware now of the power of social media, but they're still blokes young. I mean, they're just young blokes.
Yeah.
Their brains they're matured yet, sort of. I mean, I think the science has said that you're not a sort of an adult until you're like even 29, 30.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Okay, so Matt, during the course of your time following Canberra, we've seen, well, as you said there in the beginning, they got a lot of players from up in Queensland. Then we discussed earlier, they went to the Pacific. In 2015, they signed a hooker from Hull Kingston Rovers called Josh Hodson. And this is the beginning of, something new there, because he's the first of a wave of English players that come to the club.
He didn't have the same effect as Mal coming from Queensland, but it was similar in that, when he first came, others followed, because, again, he's a respected guy and a very good footballer, and I think, the likes of Elliot Whitehead and John Bateman, and the 3 or 4 Pommy guys we got there now are all just saw that Josh Hodson came over and made a go of it. And again, Camber had been derided as this cold and boring joint. Well, for the Poms it was bloody nice. It was 20 minutes to get everywhere, and it was 2 hours to the beach into the snow, and they were there to play footy anyway. And they were, Josh Hodson's a wonderfully professional footballer, and he was there to improve as a player and to win things. And John Bateman was the same, and Elliot Whitehead's the same. And they came out And again, they mixed with some talented locals, and then a bloke like C.S. Soliola,
Yes.
who was really was a real not only a leader for sort of the Polynesian fellas, but everyone. He was just a widely respected bloke, and when he went, guys followed, and he talked about culture. He set great culture there, but they all did. Josh Hodson, instigated just to be professional and to win, and then 2015 they had a great season, and they didn't make the finals, but Blake Austin turned up, started bopping around. Aidan Caesar was going well. BJ Leilua turned up. Jordan Rapana started playing superb footy too. So
Yes.
2016, 2015 when Hodson came, again was sort of another perfect storm of
Right.
of just personnel peaking at the right time, and following and all buying into what Ricky Stewart was selling, and which was to play his talents.
Yeah, and it was during this period as well, in 2017, the club adopts the Viking clap. It's sort of an introduction to all the home matches. And Matt, again, from a supporter's point of view, I sort of see this as a great way of unifying the club supporters. It's like everyone's in on this. Doesn't matter who you are, what you are, where you're from, what you do. I just sort of think it's a fairly unifying form of support for the club.
Yeah, 100%. It's sort of like the Mexican wave of its time.
Yeah.
It just gets everyone involved. It's a cool thing to do, and I really admire the club for these sort of initiatives. They got that great big horn as well.
Yeah.
They blow, and they borrowed this sort of stuff from. I think the Viking clap came from Iceland's football team.
Yes.
The horn might have come from the Minnesota Vikings or something like that. But oddly enough, I don't know how we're going here now, but the Vikings didn't even have horns on their helmets, I'm told.
Okay.
So I don't know where they got that sort of a historical funny thing. But look, as a fan going down there, it's cool. You do the clap, and it gets them going, and and the players run out. They love it. It's another little, what do you call it? Another little 16th man, or 18th man, if you like, for the footy club. It's good. Short answer, it's good.
And in 2019, of this wave of Pommy immigration here takes Canberra Raiders to the grand final in 2019. It's the club's first grand final in 25 years. It's another match that you highlight in your book there, but I don't know, Matt. Do you want to recount your memories of that 2019 grand final?
I watched it from one of the nosebleed seats, and I was actually covering the game for the Guardian, so I wrote a match report. I followed a match report almost on a full time with a laptop sitting on my on my lap. Look, covering it from up there, the ball bouncing off the trainer's head.
Yes, that was a yes.
And, that's it, but it was sort of my main takeaway from the game, and I wrote in the book that I just think the Roosters were just too good. The Roosters survived wave after wave of attack, and then were good enough to spit it back and go the length of the field to score. The six again thing, I don't. It was obviously a stuff up, but they eventually, ironically, got it right. But I mean, the Roosters have defended something like 25 sets in a row successfully. There's nothing to say that they would have not defended 26, 27, 28 had the Raiders had that. The Roosters were just too good. The bounce of the ball off the bloke's head at the start. Had they gone back, let's say Elliot Whitehead picks up the bouncing ball and runs 40 metres to score, Tedesco would have run him down. But say he had, and that ball goes that goes upstairs because they look at it on the video, and then they see Seola taking Luke Keary's legs out in a dangerous fashion. Seola goes off for 10 minutes, and it's a Roosters penalty. So that's that would have happened. So, I mean, in a game as harem scarum as rugby league, to pull out one little thing like that as we were robbed. I mean, the Roosters lost Orbison for 67 minutes.
Yeah.
Kevin Cronk was off the field for 10 minutes, and the Raiders still couldn't score. So the Roosters were just too good. I don't know, but it was bad, and I wish we'd won. But what are you going to do?
Yeah. All right, Matt. Just before we finish up here, I'd like to. I'll say that I haven't read the whole book, but the Milk. It's not just about the Canberra Raiders. It's sort of a commentary about the game of rugby league itself as a whole. It's sort of a social outlook as well, I think, into Australia during this time. But how can you get a hold of the book?
At the moment, it's just available online, and there's a website called themilkbook.com. The Milk, THE, milkbook.com.
Yeah.
I'm going to get into shops at some stage, go and see your Dimmicks and these guys. One thing, possibly people, certainly Queensland or Brisbane listeners and Raiders fans who'll be in Brisbane for Magic Round might come along. I'm doing a launch at a pub called the Lord Alfred on Caxton Street. It's opposite the Caxton, I believe.
Yeah.
And we're going to try and get. I'm going to aim for Gary Belcher to come along and have a chat. But any local Raiders blokes up there are going to try and get along to do a bit of a Q&A and sign some books and then get over and watch us beat up the Sharks.
All right. So it's themilkbook.com. That's one word there, themilkbook.com. And Matt, just final question. What's been the impact of the Canberra Raiders on Matt Cleary?
Well, at the moment, it's got a 52-year-old man with a big year planner on looking at it on the wall with all the games where they're playing. So I'm running my life around when they're playing. Got a whole bunch of little road trips. I went to Mudgee. I'm hoping to go to Dubbo. And I'll live up on all the beaches of Sydney, so I get down to Canberra. Sort of probably 10 times a year to watch them play. It's been interesting. As a fan, they're just a fun team to follow. So they're a source of fun for me. I enjoy sitting down, whether it's 3:00 in the afternoon on my couch with a tinny, or having done the Viking Clap in Canberra, or getting at the Mudgee, or going into Wollongong and watching them. They're a great source of enjoyment for me, and I suppose a bit of that tribalism comes out as well. I'm a fan, and I hope to be for a long time as well. No more Super Leagues, but they're my team, and it's as and everyone, all this is though. It's just nice to identify with blokes and to have your favourite players, and for them to run out on a Sunday afternoon, and for you to sort of spiritually run out with them. So that's why I do it.
That's the way it was. My life as a Canberra Raider. This program was recorded in the studios of Undercover Music. Your producer is Adriano Aldemar. Until next time, may the force be with you.
Machine. We hit them hard, so they see green. We're big and strong, we're fast and lean. That's why we're called the Green Machine. We're the bad and mean Green Machine. Fearsome men from the ACT. Don't try and stop these men in green, 'cause we'll hit ya, hit ya, hit ya, and you'll see green. There's just one color that'll do. The fighting green of the green machine. We're the bad and mean green machine. Feel some men from the ACT. Don't try and stop these men in green. Cause we'll hit ya, hit ya, hit ya, and you'll see green. We're the bad and mean green machine. Feel some men from the ACT. Don't try and stop these men in green. Cause we'll hit ya, hit ya, hit ya, and you'll see green. Hit ya, hit ya, hit ya, hit ya, hit ya, hit ya, hit ya.